On a deep night, when darkness reigned over the cemetery, David decided to take a walk along its deserted paths. Old graves, covered with lichen and dust, surrounded him on all sides. A muffled sound could be heard beneath each step, as if the cemetery groaned beneath his feet. David's heart raced, but his curiosity overcame his fear. Suddenly, in the distance, he saw the silhouette of a standing figure, something strange and incomprehensible. Because it was too far away, David could not make out what it was, but his instinct told him it was something sinister. Slowly but determinedly, David approached the figure, feeling the cold that emanated from it. With each step, the atmosphere in the cemetery grew denser and darker. The air was filled with the smell of rot and dampness. As David stepped closer, he saw that the figure was a tall and dark-skinned man in an old and tattered suit. His eyes glittered in the darkness, and there was a serene expression on his face. Suddenly, the man began to move in his direction, step by step, without averting his gaze. Fear gripped David, and his legs became heavy, as if chained to the ground. He tried to step back, but something prevented him from doing so. The figure drew nearer and nearer, and David became vaguely aware that it was carrying something evil and inexplicable with it. In a last attempt to resist, David closed his eyes, praying that this awful encounter would be over. He felt something pass him by like a ghost, leaving only a chilling breeze. When David opened his eyes, the figure was gone. Silence enveloped the cemetery, and only the rustle of leaves reminded him of his encounter with the mysterious stranger. He realized that the cemetery was hiding something inscrutable and dark. Whether it was a ghost or someone's dark shadow, it awakened in him a sense of unease and fear. David's heart told him that this experience was only the beginning of his journey into the world of the cemetery's eerie mysteries and riddles. David felt a strong pressure on his chest, as if unseen hands were squeezing him with force. His breathing became labored, and shadows flashed around him, giving his surroundings a vision of nightmare. He tried to get out of this atmospheric nightmare, but his feet felt as if they were stuck to the ground. Each step became harder, and the world around him distorted, intertwining reality with nightmare. Far away, in the darkness of the cemetery, David could make out the silhouettes of two figures swaying slowly back and forth. They were human-sized, but their features were distorted, and their faces were invisible. David's heart sank with horror as he realized that these figures were following him. He realized that he was trapped by his own fears, which came alive in the cemetery. The shadows reached out to him, wrapping around his legs like the cold fingers of a dead man. Muffled moans and whispers came from the depths of the cemetery, making the hair on David's body stand on end. With each passing moment, the pursuers drew nearer, and their quiet rustling became more and more audible. David tried to scream for help, but his throat was filled with an unknown force that robbed him of his voice. In desperation and fright, he turned to his only salvation: escape. He clutched at his last shreds of strength and sprinted through the gloomy alleys and burial grounds. But the faster he ran, the thicker the darkness surrounding him became. Soon his legs buckled, and he fell to the ground, covered with leaves and dirt. In utter despair, David decided that this was the end of his story. His strength deserted him, and he closed his eyes, preparing for the inevitable encounter with his pursuers. But suddenly, in the silence, he heard a woman's voice, quiet and heartfelt. "Don't be afraid. They can't hurt you. It is only your own fears that have come to life in this cemetery. Immerse yourself in your inner power and free yourself from them." David opened his eyes and saw before him the figure of a woman standing in complete stillness. She was emitting a gentle light, and her eyes radiated tranquility. It was a spirit who had appeared to him at the last moment. Gathering all his inner courage, David realized that fears had no power over him unless he allowed them to do so himself. He rose from the ground, overcoming his own anxieties, and turned away from the dead figures who disappeared into the darkness. He remained in the cemetery, among the graves and monuments, but now his fears were overcome. David had left the place, but he had left a part of himself there, a part that had grown stronger and wiser after encountering real nightmares. In the dark and gloomy cemetery, where the shadows of ancient trees covered the dead, an eerie story unfolded, told only by whispers in quiet corners of gloomy bars. Anyone who has ever dared to walk the abandoned alleys of the cemetery at midnight has claimed that unexplained phenomena occur in the dark. One day in the moonlight, when a dead silence lay over the coffins, a young girl named Emilia decided to gather evidence of supernatural powers. Armed with a flashlight and a recording device, she set out for the cemetery, determined to uncover its secrets. As she walked along the tangled paths, Emilia felt a cool breeze whisper in her ear, as if urging caution. In the distance, she heard faint sounds of rustling and froze in place. Shuddering, she looked around, but saw nothing but the dark silhouettes of old graves. The girl's heart began to beat faster, but her resolve remained unchanged. As she moved forward, Emilia noticed a strange light flickering between the trees. She realized it was fire. With anxiety in her heart, she stepped closer and found a group of people gathered around a huge fire. Their clothes looked ancient and shabby, and their faces were covered with masks that resembled symbols from old religious rituals. Staring at what was going on, Emilia decided to move closer to examine the details. She crept carefully through the trees, careful not to draw attention, and watched the mysterious ceremony. People began to slowly sing a hymn, which was filled with strange and elusive melodies. Suddenly, flaming figures lit up in the center of the bonfire, emitting an ominous light. Emily's heart beat faster, and adrenaline permeated every cell of her body. She realized that she had stumbled upon something far darker and more dangerous than just supernatural phenomena. Unable to contain her curiosity, she decided to record the sounds and conversations to uncover all the mysteries of this mysterious sect. As she bent down to turn on the recording device, the wind came up in a violent storm, silencing all sounds around her. Suddenly, the masked men turned toward Emilia, and she felt their stares through their masks. Terrified, she realized she had been discovered. She dropped the device and took off running, stumbling across the uneven ground and deeper into the murky depths of the cemetery. There was a noise behind her, and she knew she was being followed. A shadow from the cemetery's past seemed to encompass her, shrinking ever harder. Finding herself on the precipice of a terrifying abyss, Emilia realized there was no other way out. She closed her eyes, surrendering completely to her fate. However, as she waited to die, something incredible happened. The wind suddenly stopped, the darkness cleared, and Emilia woke up in a bright room. Thinking it was just a dream, she turned around with difficulty and found herself on a bed in a hospital room. A nurse came up to her and told her that she had been found unconscious in the cemetery and had been taken to the hospital. The whole cemetery story seemed like an unreal nightmare to Emilia. She was left with questions that had no answers. What was this cult? How had she come to the brink of death? And most importantly, why had she been saved? Now Emilia turned to other sources of information to solve the mystery. She spent long hours in the library, studying historical records and rare documents about the cemetery. Gradually, she deciphered the mysterious symbols and uncovered long-forgotten secrets that shed light on the events that took place there. It turned out that the cemetery was a sacred place for an ancient cult group that performed rituals designed to awaken the souls of the dead. They believed that through these rituals they could obtain eternal life. However, their practices were interrupted by their own perishing rites, which led to their deaths in the cemetery. Emilia's appearance at the cemetery proved to be no coincidence. Her presence worked like a key, activating the forgotten mechanisms of the ritual. Through her courage and determination, she survived the ordeal while resurrecting the souls of dead cult members. Emilia was now aware that she bore the responsibility for the fate of these souls. She resolved to learn more about the ancient rituals and to begin researching what happened in the cemetery the night she was rescued. Her way forward was shrouded in mystical mystery and danger, But she was willing to go all the way to uncover all the secrets of this creepy cemetery and accept her part in this otherworldly story. At the funeral of Mary, young and suddenly gone, there was an air of deep sadness and grief in the air. Relatives and friends gathered in the small church to bid her farewell. Among those present, however, there was a strange figure, a tall man in a black suit and dark glasses, who stood quietly in a corner of the church. His presence caused bewilderment and uncertainty among those present, but no one dared approach to find out who he was and what he was doing here. As the ceremony went on, the gloomy figure watched the proceedings unremittingly. Its intense gaze made people hesitate and feel uncomfortable pressure on themselves. Frightened and intrigued, they began whispering among themselves, trying to figure out who this mysterious stranger was. Soon after the ceremony ended, everyone gathered headed toward the cemetery, where Maria's remains were to be buried. However, at the most inopportune moment, a mysterious man in black stepped forward and blocked the way to the tomb. His face was carefully concealed by dark glasses, and no one could make out his expression. He began to speak in a quiet but piercing voice that penetrated the souls of those present. "Mary, you shouldn't be here. You have one more thing to do, one more mission. Take with you what is yours and follow me," he pronounced, pointing to a distant section of the cemetery. These words caused confusion and consternation among Mary's family and friends. But one of her friends, Sophia, decided to accept the challenge and follow the man. As a close friend of Maria's, she believed that this might be the last wish of the departed woman. The mysterious man in black turned and headed toward a remote section of the cemetery, followed by Sophia. The others, filled with fear and disbelief, decided to wait, hoping it was all just some strange game or illusion. However, when the mysterious man and Sophia disappeared from sight, they were gone without a trace. Maria's family and friends remained in the cemetery, overwhelmed by incredible anxiety and worry. The days and weeks that followed were filled with unanswered questions and searches, but Sophia and the mysterious stranger remained invisible. No one knew what had happened to them or why they had left Mary's funeral. The story left a deep mark in people's hearts, turning their minds upside down about death and the world after. The mysterious stranger and his call to Sophia became a mystery that has never been solved. However, everyone who witnessed the incident remembered it for a lifetime, carrying with them the authenticity and inescapable mystery of what happened at Mary's funeral. Over time, the story of the incident at Mary's funeral became the subject of speculation and conversation among the local community. Various versions and speculations ran from mouth to mouth, but no one could find an explanation for the mystery. Some said the mysterious man in black was a government agent and his appearance was connected with covert operations. Others claimed that he was an angel of death who had come for Mary to escort her to the afterlife. But there was no evidence or basis to support these theories. Rumors began to circulate in the city that people who had seen the mysterious man in black were experiencing unusual dreams and visions. They told of meetings with deceased loved ones who warned them of events to come or conveyed messages from the afterlife. But these stories were more a matter of controversy and superstition than scientifically proven fact. For years after the incident at Mary's funeral, the cemetery became a place looked upon with apprehension and anxiety. People avoided it at night and tried to walk past it during the day to avoid encountering something unexplained and frightening. In time, however, interest in the story gradually waned. Life went on as usual, and the incident at Maria's funeral remained in the past, becoming an anomaly that could not be resolved. People had forgotten, but the cemetery had always carried a touch of mysticism and mystery. And although many questions remain unanswered, the story of the incident at Mary's funeral has become part of legends and stories passed down from generation to generation. It has become a symbol of a dark, mysterious past that will always live on in the memory of the townspeople, reminding them of the inscrutability and mystery that sometimes lies in the most ordinary events.